the claims period is open for First Nations drinking water class action. Now, you can submit a claim form for compensation under the First Nations drinking water settlement. The deadline to submit is March 7th, and Kevin Hille is a partner at Olthuis Kleer Townshed law firm. Kevin is an experienced litigator who is committed to advancing Indigenous rights, and he is a member of the class counsel team for First Nations drinking water settlement. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, this is definitely an interesting topic to us, and we wanted to learn more about it. So we're going to start with the basics. What can you tell us? What is the First Nations drinking water class action?
Yeah, so our firm was approached by a small First Nation in Northern Ontario several years ago that has the unfortunate distinction of having the longest running drinking water advisory in the country. And as we were trying to find ways to address that terrible situation, several other First Nations started proposed class actions in Canada about that issue. So we teamed up with their lawyers at McCarthy Petro and brought a national class action about the deplorable state of drinking water on First Nations reserves. It turned out over 250 First Nations had long-term drinking water advisories of a year or more since 1995. And so the class action was about getting them compensation, but also getting long-term funding commitments from Canada to address those infrastructure needs. In July of 2021, we reached a settlement with Canada, which involved $1.9 billion in compensation and a major commitment to future infrastructure spending of a minimum of $6 billion on water and wastewater infrastructure.
All right. Now, Kevin, who is eligible to apply?
So anyone who lived on a First Nations reserve or First Nation lands, who's a member of a First Nation, between the years of 1995 and 2021, where those lands were subject to a long-term drinking water advisory. Anyone who falls into that category can apply for compensation.
All right. So what are some questions that individuals can ask themselves is if this is something that they should pursue?
Yeah. First off, are they a member of a First Nation? Secondly, did they live on a reserve or First Nations lands in that period of time? And was there a drinking water advisory, or were they aware of drinking water issues? They can consult if they're unsure about whether their First Nation is eligible. They can consult the First Nations drinking water settlement website. There's an interactive map that shows all of the First Nations that were affected, and also the claims form lists the dates during which there were long-term drinking water advisories on each of those reserves.
Okay.
So if they have any questions about their eligibility, those are the places to look.
The eligibility is overall the First Nation communities, or is it for individual First Nation people living on reserve?
So it's both.
Okay.
It's both. There's individual compensation for those people who lived on reserve, but also First Nations as a whole, as communities, are receiving compensation for having been under the long-term drinking water.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what is some important information that band members should know before applying?
Before applying, I think it's important to know that their First Nation may also be preparing what's called a band council confirmation list, which is a list of all the members who lived on the reserve during the drinking water advisory. And when a First Nation submits that list to the claims administrator, being listed on it alone qualifies that person for compensation, or can they don't need to put in their own claim. So
Okay.
if their First Nation is preparing a list, they may not need to put in their own claims form. There are a few exceptions where they're claiming for injuries that they suffered.
Oh, okay, that's good. Now, is personal information collected?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you'll see from the claims form that individuals need to be able to provide basic contact information, information about their status, and banking information in order to be, first of all, for their eligibility to be determined by the claims administrator, and then secondly, to direct payment if they're eligible for compensation.
Okay. Now, do individual band members need legal advice?
The claims form is quite straightforward, and eligibility, basic eligibility, is quite straightforward. It's just based on a person's residence and the dates of their residence on an affected reserve, as well as their status as a member of a First Nation. There's no need to prove any kind of causation or that they were affected by the water advisory. They only need to show that they were there, and which dates that they lived on that reserve.
Now, you mentioned,
The
sorry.
Yeah, with injuries, it's a bit different.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
That part of the claim form, they identify which injuries they suffered,
Okay.
which which doctor or health practitioner they saw during that period, and they may be asked by the administrator to provide documentation showing that they were treated and diagnosed for that condition.
Okay.
We, as class counsel, are available to provide advice on those injury claims.
All right. Now, is there anything else that you would like to add or share with our viewers?
Yeah, we understand. I mean, from working with these communities for years now, we know that being under a long-term drinking water advisory, suffering as a community and as an individual can lead to long-term trauma, and that filling out a claims form and making claims for injury can be very difficult. It can unearth some really difficult emotions and experiences that people have been through. So there is a number people can call that's listed on the claims form, the Hope for Wellness program, in the event they have these experiences and need help talking through them.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin. We've been speaking with Kevin Hille, who is a partner at OKT law firm, and he is a experienced litigator who is committed to advancing Indigenous rights. He's also a member of the class counsel team for the First Nations drinking water settlement. Thank you, Kevin.
You're very welcome. Take care.
On February 1st, Bonaparte Band members will be provided with assistance at the Bonaparte Band Hall for filling out water claim forms. from 9 to 3 p.m. If you want further information, you can contact Sean Bennett at the Bonaparte Band office. Now, if you also need emotional support, you can again call Hope for Wellness free of charge at 1-855-242-3310. Thanks so much for watching The Rural Perspective.